Welcome to the Chasing Poker Greatness YouTube channel. Today we're bringing you episode 4 of the Strategy Combine series, where Coach Brad and myself break down hands from the notes that have the highest impact on your overall win rate. To learn more about the Strategy Combine, make sure to stick around for the break.
Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. Once again, I am joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. John Chai. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. You know, today we're finally moving away from 2-bet pots IP PFR and into the land of 3-bet pots IP PFC.
Okay, so 3-bet pots, we're in position and we're the pre-flop caller. So we open, we get 3-bet, and then we call. And looks like hand number one, we got some depth involved here. Actually, we're playing 2K and L, so we got 200 big blinds with a small blind and 100 bigs with a big blind. Hero's got 4,600 on the button. Let's dive in. Hero opens to 50 from the button. Small blind, 3 bets to 12 big blinds. And we're actually at decision point number 1. I think you could, 4-bet here with ace queen. You can call, you can 4-bet. You could go either way.
Yeah, I think you're right. Any of these offsuit ace-x hands, I assume, are going to be mixed frequencies facing a out of position 3-bet. So wouldn't be shocked to see our wolf here may get $500 or something around that range. This time, though, they decided to just go with the call option since this is 3-bet pots. Yes, you probably could have guessed that.
Yeah, we gave it away that they opted to call. So 500 in the middle, flop is ace 10-8 with the 10-8 of clubs, ace of diamonds. So hero flops top pair, second kicker. The small blind starts out with like a half pot bet, a little bit more than half. I don't think hero has a lot of options other than clicking the call button on the flop.
Mm-hmm.
So hero does click the call button. Turn is the 6 of diamonds, 1060 in the pot. Villain has 3K behind. Villain bets 70% pot, and now it's a little scary. Starting to
now playing for stacks.
Yeah, starting to get a little scary. It's looking like the chips are gonna go in the middle, and now is kind of the phase of the hand where hero's got to kind of take stock of what his range is. If he's playing a pure flat range on the flop, so he's not raising, the hands that naturally fit into his call turn and fold river range are going to be like 10x of diamonds, jack 10 of diamonds, 10-9 of diamonds, 8-9 of diamonds, 7-8 of diamonds, 6-7 of clubs could also call and fold on various rivers. And then the queen jack of clubs, king jack of clubs, king queen of club type hands, if they have those, or king queen of diamonds, the combo draws on the turn could also, call turn and potentially fold river depending on the run out. And hero is going to have ace 10 suited, potentially ace 8 suited, sets of 10, sets of 8s in their trapping range. So yeah, I think ace queen, it obviously kind of fits somewhere in the middle of that, where ace queen is obviously has a lot of equity here facing this bet. And yeah, it's going to be quite dicey on the river. We just really need to hope that villain doesn't put the rest of the money in, or hope that the river is one of the flush completers and villain checks so that we can, kind of exhale and check behind.
None of those things happen, actually. Kind of a combination of
yeah, so it's a blank river, the 4 of spades, 2460 in the pot. Final board is ace 10, 8, 6, 4. No flush available, and the villain checks. Now, this is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. I think this is a spot. So, the main takeaway from this hand or the main thing that I wanted viewers to take away from this hand was just how important it is to value bet thinly, even in spots where it's kind of scary like this, or a little more on the uncomfortable side, to value bet a hand that's not particularly nutted in a very, very big pot. We started out at 180 big blinds effective, so this is going to be significantly more chips at risk than normal. But still, I think it's really, really important to value bet here and find these types of thin value bets, especially in spots where you yourself can represent a lot of bluffs, right? Like you said that a lot of our calling range on the turn is some sort of draw, especially when there's 2 flush draws available plus a a Broadway gutter and, all sorts of open enders with like Jack nine, even Jack nine getting in there. And I think in those types of situations, especially, it's going to be more likely that you get bluff caught by a wider range because you have so many potential draws or potential bluffs that you can rep on the river. I think this is a spot that I see a lot of lower stakes players making the mistake of just exhaling and checking back, right? The action that you were imagining taking on like a flush completer, and not pushing themselves hard enough to find kind of uncomfortable thin value bets on these Ricky 4 of spades rivers.
Yeah, and the push and pull of the situation is such that I think a lot of players will fall into a bad tendency to value jam a lot of their like sets and 2-pair type hands instead of checking the river to bluff catch or induce. And the more that the out of position player jams their like sets of 10s or sets of 8s here, where they're like ace 10 suiteds and doesn't check, the better that value jamming ace queen does, because when they check out of position, there's a lot of removal to the nutted hands. And so like it's just another kind of reminder here for the listener that when you're out of position in a 3-bet pot as a preflop raiser, sometimes you do have to check nutted hands at this node, because if you don't, then you get in these spots where hero has ace queen and it's effectively the nuts, because if you jam every better hand than ace queen, including like ace king, well, then ace queen is essentially the nuts versus a check, and it can just jam without being punished whatsoever. So, it is quite important to have some value in your bet check range in these types of situations so that your opponent can't just value bet the living bejesus out of you, and they get punished for jamming a hand like ace queen that may just fold to a jam, honestly. Like if the out of position villain just jams, ace queen may just fold. But when they check, now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm actually kind of happy to put the money in, because like maybe they could be betting like ace 5 suited, ace jack, ace 5 suited, ace jack, and then checking the river to induce, versus all of my potential busted flush draws, and then like maybe my 6-7s, my like pair plus straight draw, my pocket 7s, maybe pocket 9s, 10-9. There's a lot of perceived bluffs for us, and that, yeah, if you don't check strong hands out of position, you're going to be in for a world of pain when you're playing against somebody that is able to hand read very well, factor in the removal, and just go to town when they have a hand that looks somewhat marginal, but when you factor everything in, it becomes like, oh, this hand is actually like, should be a pretty clear value bet in this exact situation.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point there. Something to look for before you make these thinner value jams on the river, next time you're the 3-bet pot IP PFC, the caller preflop. One of the data points that I would look for that Brad kind of touched on is the out of position player capable of checking a polarized range on the river? Or are they just kind of like the ho-hum reg that checks completely linearly and doesn't have a nutted part of their range that they check on the river? If they don't have that part of their range in their checking range, and they're just checking, their weakest hands and betting their strongest hands, that makes life so easy for us as an in-position player, where hands like ace queen just become slam dunk jams on the river versus that player type. And that just really shows the importance of kind of playing the strategy that Brad was bringing up as the out-of-position player, making sure that you're doing a good job of checking a polarized range on the river instead of just weak bluff catchers and breaks draws.
And the villain does call and shows up with ace tray of clubs. So they had top pair with a nut flush draw, went bet, check, and ended up bluff catching for all the chips and losing to ace queen, and probably, punching their monitor, doing something outrageous. Actually, probably just sighing to themselves and
talking about how they never get there.
Yeah, and reloading.
As promised in the intro, here's a closer look at the CPG Strategy Combine. The Strategy Combine is a database analysis tool that will allow you to analyze your game like a professional, identify where you're crushing and where your game needs work, compare yourself at every major node to the best players in the CPG Wolves CFP, see how you stack up versus the top players on our high-stakes team, create an improvement plan based on the specific nodes that most urgently need your attention. Focus your time and energy on the spots that matter the most. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/CPG Strategy Combine to read testimonials from the beta group, as well as register yourself for the next Combine. I hope to see you there. Now, back to Tactical Tuesday.
All right, hand number 2. Hero opens the king, queen of spades in the cutoff. They get 3-bet by the small blind. Hero calls. Flop is ace, king, 8 with no spade. So hero flop second pair with top kicker. Opponent bets, what is that, $35 into 120, so something around 30%. Mm-hmm. Hero doesn't really have any options here with its king. Just going to be pure calling, I would imagine. They turn trips. Happy day. The small blind checks, and now we have, kind of our first critical, questionable decision where you could go a bunch of different ways. You could check behind, you could bet to set up river jam, you could just go a few different ways. There's 190 in the pot. The villain has 400 behind and hero covers.
Yeah, it's kind of the blessing and the curse of having really good value in position in this node is that it's great to have value, but then you run into the problem of what's the best way to play this hand? There's so many different options that I have. I think that the small blind is likely checking their entire range on this turn. What do you think? Or
I would think so.
Checking. Yeah,
I would think
very
so.
likely checking close to their entire range on this turn. So think that they can have just an infinite number of bluff catchers that call turn and call river. I think when we call 1/3 or a quarter, something, whatever the size that he bet on the flop, we're going to have all the gut shots, all the backdoor flush draws. Basically any 3 straight 3 flush or a combination of the two, I think is going to be in there. So, we're not hurting for bluffs or perceived bluffs on the turn when we stab the turn. So I think I would like starting out with a turn float here, probably for a small size.
Okay. So small being there's 190, 50?
Yeah, something close to a third pot.
So hero bets close to a third pot. They bet $61. Setting up, essentially a little bit more than one SPR.
What do you think about the best way to play king queen on the turn? Would you have done?
I'm of mixed opinion. I think I probably bet the turn. I think that's where villain will perceive that we have the most bluffs when we bet the turn on the king. I think that when we check behind the turn and then jam river facing a check, that it looks a little bit suspicious that we passed an opportunity to bluff the turn and now we're jamming. I also think that when villain bets the river and we jam, it's also a little bit scary. And there are scenarios where villain could just bet, 170 on the river, and we actually just kind of don't end up jamming with our trips. We end up just calling because it's tough to get called by enough worse hands when villain sizes up on the river. So, the better thing about checking behind would be that maybe villain can 2x rip some queen jack or queen 10 or jack 10 type hand that we miss value from when we bet the turn. So I think those are the pros and cons. But personally, I would just bet the turn and go for the river jam and target their bluff catchers. And maybe occasionally when we stab the turn small, we get check raised by some of those hands that would bluff the river as well. So we may not lose out on that bluff region 100% of the time. So I think there's a lot of just pros to betting the turn when you have trips in a spot where, you have a lot of bluffs as well. So river's a queen, so hero river's a boat. Boats are good hands.
They are good hands.
312, the queen is actually somewhat unfortunate in that it kind of reduces our availability of potential bluffs where, queen jack, queen 10 made pairs and they can probably just check behind because I think the out of position player can call with an 8. They can call with jacks. They can call with 10s. Maybe they call with 9s even facing a third. So I think that the queen, when we jam, it reduces our number of perceived bluffs. And I think that's a little bit sad. Jack 10 makes it straight. But, maybe it gives them a pair and they can imagine we've got some sort of 9-10 of clubs or 6-7 of clubs, some sort of 3 straight like that, or we just go ahead and turn pocket 7s into a bluff on this run out or something along those lines. But yeah, there's nothing really to do other than jam. I think we set up 1-to-1 SPR, so just jam and hope that, they bluff catch, and they do. Oh boy. And we lose to ace king. Ouch. I think if we go back to the turn here, your hypothesis that they check range, pretty spot on. I really like their turn check, honestly, when they turn ace king. They give us a chance to bluff. They give us a chance to value on ourselves. Really clever, really nice check for the out of position preflop raiser here. And, it didn't matter with our exact hand how they played it. And I think that's kind of the point, right? Like it didn't matter with our exact hand. They're going to stack us no matter what they do. But if we did have a hand like maybe 8-9, and we're like, well, maybe we should turn this into a bluff on the river, pocket sevens, then they extract a lot of value from a different category, a different portion of our range that they wouldn't had they just bet the turn, which is really nice.
Right. And they stack a lot of our natural bluffing range on the turn too on this river, right? Or just on a lot of rivers. So like if we were bluffing Jack 10, he's still going to stack us if we were
exactly.
If we're like losing our minds with Queen 10 on the river or something like that, like that's an equally likely bluff, I think, relative to like the pocket sevens or the 8-9 type hand. So, really, really well played by the out of position player. And I think mostly like the river, like you said, is kind of a non-decision in our shoes, but really the turn, I think, was the kind of the meat of the discussion here and how to play your value and having a plan for what's going to happen on the river. And I think like the important things that I'm going to take away from what you said was just like, hey, like any action that we take on the river is going to look extremely strong, so strong that it might even be scary for us to take, right? Like that one being like, hey, he bets the river and we have to jam over a big size. But even just 2x jamming the river after checking back the turn, I think is, like you said, may seem a little bit suspicious. Why didn't we take our bluffing opportunity on the turn when we kind of had a crystal clear chance there to fold out some of the small blinds hands? So yeah,
interesting hand. The crux of it did come down to the turn, and I think both players played the turn very, very, very well. Kudos, and that's all I got for today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment if you have any questions about the hands, have any insights, or have any questions about the node that we discussed today.
And we'll see you next week for more 3-bet pots and position preflop caller.
See you next week.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.